Shadowkiv Hennas watched the temperature on his wristband tick past 48 degrees and then give up, flashing a soft warning glyph instead. The air tasted like hot metal inside his breather. Heat shimmered off the sand in waves, turning the horizon into a rippling, molten line. Behind him, his sand skimmer lay half buried in the slope of a dune. One stabilizer fin snapped clean in a freak gust. The cargo pod, a narrow crate of sealed Arn crystals, gleamed faintly in the sun where he dragged it out and propped it in the scant shadow of the broken hull. "May Kai swallow you," Shadr muttered at the wreck, out of breath, "and your builders, and their ancestors." The skimmer said nothing. The wind did. It hissed over the crest of the dune, carrying the fine dust that got into everything. Seals, joints, weapons, skin. The kind of dust that abrades a man away one breath at a time. He checked his water again. 2 flasks, one half full. One emergency, sealed with a red wax braid. 2 days, he thought. Maybe. He looked east. Nothing but more dunes. West, the horizon dipped very slightly, a broken line where distant flatlands might begin. The light flats, he calculated, Theknuthbals. If he could reach their edge by nightfall, he might see the glow of the cities on the far side. Scorched expanse, temple arcologies, vertical cities stabbing light into the sky. Thihas, Netas, Cephas, names like promises. If he crouched beside the cargo crate, laid his hand on the seal. The emblem of the Majesty's treasury glared back at him, a stylized twin moon sigil cut through with the angular script of Ila Spiki. He could crack it. 3 crystals would buy him a new skimmer, a new life, passage off this frying pan of a planet. He pictured the Majesty's enforcers. He pictured a noose. He pictured his sister's face when she learned her brother had stolen from the Farron's vaults. Shadr exhaled, slow and bitter, and left the seal unbroken. "Fine," he told the desert. "We do this the hard way." He strapped the crate to his back with scavenged tie-downs from the skimmer, feeling his spine complain at the weight. Then he pulled his scarf up over his breather, tightened the seals of his cooling suit, and started walking west. The first hour was manageable. His cooling mesh still had charge. The suit wicked sweat and pumped warmth away from his core, while thin solar strips along his shoulders drank the sunlight and kept the system alive. The second hour was worse. The dunes grew steeper, softer underfoot. Each step sank half a foot into the sand, and every time he hauled his trailing leg free, the crate tugged at his shoulders like a determined ghost. By the third hour, the horizon had hardly changed. The sun sat like a white, lidless eye overhead. The desert did its work. Thought shrank down to short distances, to the next rise, the next patch of slightly firmer sand, the rhythm of step breathe, step breathe. The breather hummed softly, filtering dust, the only sound besides his own heartbeat and the faint scrape of the crate's straps. He didn't notice the wind shift at first. It started as a subtle change in the way the sand hissed across the dunes, then a sharpness in the air that sliced through the heat like a knife. His filters ticked an amber warning. Shadr stopped and lifted his goggles. Far to the south, the horizon had thickened into a dirty rising wall, a darker line under the sky, growing. "Sandstorm," he said, voice dry. The word tasted like old fear. He checked his coordinates again, but the little compass disc on his band jerked uselessly, confused. Static, the storm already snarling with charged particles. No skimmer, no shelter, no Milo rocks here, no carved faux claw clinging to their faces like barnacles on stone, just dunes. He turned in a slow circle. The desert turned with him, the same on every side. He could dig, bury himself, but that only worked with looser storms, thinner veils of sand. The wall coming toward him was dense, roiling, one of the unresting wild's larger tantrums bleeding into the light flats. Then he saw it, a slight dark bulge against the sand, 2 dunes over, outcrop, rock, or a mirage. He didn't have the luxury to doubt. He stumbled toward it, every step now a sprint. The wind hit him first, hot and abrasive, punching into his chest, then shoving at his legs. Sand stung his exposed skin at the edges of his seals. The wall of dust loomed larger, swallowing the sky, turning the sun into a diffuse, sickly smear. "Move, move, move," he rasped, half to himself, half to the unseen ancestors he'd never bothered much with before. The outcrop resolved out of the shimmering heat, a low, jagged tooth of dark rock, basalt or ancient Milo. No carved phoglyphs, no ladders, no vertical dwellings, just a lump of stone. Shadow threw himself against the wind shadow side just as the storm arrived. The world went away. Sound became one endless roar. Sand hammered his back and helmet, found every weakness in his clothing, tried to sandblast him straight out of existence. He curled around the cargo crate, making himself small, hood up, breather pressed to his scarf to help the filters. Time dissolved. There was before the storm and inside it, and nothing else. Shadow threw himself against the wind shadow side just as the storm arrived. The world went away. Sound became one endless roar. Sand hammered his back and helmet, found every weakness in his clothing, tried to sandblast him straight out of existence. He curled around the cargo crate, making himself small, hood up, breather pressed to his scarf to help the filters. Time dissolved. There was before the storm and inside it, and nothing else. At some point, the cooling mesh failed. He felt it go not as a sharp change, but as a slow realization that his own sweat was now boiling under the fabric, that his skin burned badly enough he didn't dare move. He drifted somewhere between waking and blankness, anchored only by the hard, unyielding weight of the crate in his arms and the rasp of his breath. When the world returned, it did so in degrees. First, the roar softened to a hiss, then to a low, constant shush. The pressure on his back lessened. A faint light filtered through his sand-caked goggles. He rolled onto his side with a groan, coughing dust into the breather's filters. The sky was the wrong color, murky, orange-gray, but visible. The worst had passed. Sand had piled around him in drifts, nearly covering his legs. The rock outcrop had taken the brunt. Its wind shadow had saved him. The crate lay under his arm, half buried, but intact. He lay there for a long moment, staring up at the hazy sky, feeling his heart pound. "You still there, Rudbidh?" he croaked. The planet, as usual, declined to answer. By the time the storm's tail had passed and the sky cleared properly, the sun had dipped toward the western edge of the world. The heat bled away with unnerving speed. Shadow hauled himself loose from the sand, muscles trembling, and forced down 3 slow swallows from his half-full flask. The water felt like liquid blessing, like everlasting wilderness dew. He wanted to drink it all. He didn't. The horizon to the west had changed. There, low and thin, lay a faint, glittering band. At first, he thought it was another mirage, the desert playing tricks with heat and dust. Then the band flickered. Lights. Distant city lights, smeared by atmosphere but unmistakable. A web of shimmering glow across the flat line of the world, like a necklace laid on the throat of the desert. The light flats, Teknuth bars. He laughed once, a hoarse, surprised bark. The sound was almost swallowed by the open sky. "All right," he said softly. "All right." He shifted the crate onto his back again and started walking toward the lights. Night fell swiftly, like a curtain pulled down. Heat fled, cold rushed in. He'd almost forgotten how fast the desert could turn. The world that had tried to cook him alive by day now reached into his bones with thin, icy fingers. The sky, in return, gave him everything. Stars exploded into being overhead, sharp and clean. The band of the galaxy was a pale, milky river. Kais hung fat and restless, veined with dull, volcanic glow. And Udug rode higher, serene and crystalline, bright enough to draw faint lines on the sand. In the still air, he could hear far-off sounds, the thrum of some distant transport, the faint crackle of static in his ear from his fried band, the almost inaudible tick of cooling rock. The sand under his boots had changed too, firmer, flatter. He had reached the edge of the motionless, light-catching plains that gave the light flats their name. Sand here was packed hard by prevailing winds, broken only by the low, stubborn mats of extremophile grasses the ancestors had seeded into the soil centuries ago. Their grey-green blades moved like breath in the slight wind, and beyond, far beyond, the cities burned. It wasn't fire he saw, but the glow of vertical temple arcologies, great pillar cities in the scorched expanse, throwing lasers of light into the night, their stacked terraces alive with traffic. Even from here, he could see the faint outlines of Tijas and Netas, vertical gleams against the sky. He walked until his legs shook too hard to continue. He found a slight depression and sank into it, turning his back to the wind. The crate made a poor pillow, but a good shield against the air. He scraped his fingers through the top inch of sand, letting the retained warmth bleed into his numb skin. Condensation, he remembered. Outside the cities, the settlers had always survived on the desert's own breath. He unhooked the little dew sheet from his pack, a gauzy square of special fabric, and stretched it above the shallow depression, pinning the corners with stones. A tiny field trick from his early courier days, learned under a swearing sergeant who'd promised them the desert would kill the careless first. Cold air flowed over warm sand, moisture condensed. Drop by drop, the sheet beaded with precious water and trickled into the shallow cup he'd scooped between his boots. He watched the slow forming of liquid in the starlight, his eyelids growing heavy. "This world really doesn't want us here, does it?" he murmured. He thought of the great journey, of ships crossing the dark on sublight drives, generations living and dying in tin can environments, all for this, an arid, furious world that only grudgingly allowed human life to cling to its skin. And yet they'd stayed. Built temple arcologies, carved Kla into Milo, seeded artificial oases, dug water out of hopeless expanses, dragged a breathable sky into being with machines and patience. Maybe wanting had nothing to do with it. Maybe you stayed because you'd chosen, and you made it want you, piece by piece. He drank half the collected dew, saved the rest, and slept in short, stiff bursts, waking each time the cold bit too sharply. He woke to voices, soft, distant, carried strangely far across the flatlands. For a moment, still half in a dream, he thought they were the wind whispers of Rudbidh Dishegu, the whispering desert, where sound echoed oddly among temple stones. Then he realized these were spoken words in Ile-Spiki, rough but unmistakable. He pushed himself up, blinking grit from his eyes. 3 figures stood a dozen paces away, silhouettes against the paling east. Their vehicles were low shapes hunched on the sand behind them, light desert skiffs with wide runners and canvas canopies. Each figure wore layered desert clothes, faces masked, goggles gleaming. Raiders was his first panicked thought. Everlasting borderland scum out here hunting lone travelers. Then one of them lifted a hand, palm out, the open hand greeting of traders. "Traveler," a voice called. "You are early to cross Theknuth Bors on foot." The accent was thick, vowels rounded in a pattern he vaguely recognized. Thbaubadians, burning flatlands folk far from home. Shadda considered his weapons, a knife, low charge on a stunner, and the weight of the crate behind him. "I didn't exactly choose it," he called back. The 3 approached at an easy pace, staying where he could see their hands. Up close, he could see the details, cooling filaments woven into their turbans, reflective plates sewn into the backs of their cloaks. Professionals, desert runners. "Skimmer," one asked. "Broken, somewhere east. Sunk in a dune now, probably." Shadda shifted the crate on his shoulders. "Courier from the treasury house at Cephas, heading for Netas." Suspicion flickered behind the nearest pair of goggles. "Proof." He tapped the crate with one gloved knuckle. The Majesty's twin moon seal caught the dawn's first light. The 3 exchanged a look. Then the shortest of them, judging by the lines around the eyes, a woman, gave a short, impressed whistle. "You walked from a crash into a storm and out," she said, "with that on your back." "Not like I had a choice," Shadda said. He could feel his voice starting to crack, exhaustion finally gaining on adrenaline. "Choice or not," she said. "The desert has eaten better men. Come." She jerked her chin toward the skiffs. "We are caravan from Tihas, running tools and coolant to Nitas. We saw your storm on the horizon last night. The desert left you for us." The phrasing was old, almost ceremonial. He'd heard something like it in tales of the Foe clan. The land spares what it finds amusing, their storytellers said. Shadar hesitated. "Payment," he said carefully. "You'll want..." The third traveler, who hadn't spoken yet, snorted. "You're carrying the Majesty's own crystals. We'd prefer not to end our lives explaining that to the Lajashuk's agents." The woman shrugged. "Stories, then. We trade in those too. You can tell us how the storm tasted, and we'll tell you which raider bands are hunting this month. Fair exchange. It was a good deal, more than good." He let himself sag just a little, letting the crate's weight settle. "All right," he said. "You have a skiff that can carry this?" "We have a skiff that can carry anything," she replied, "including stubborn couriers." They walked together to the waiting vehicles. One of the runners was already opening a reinforced compartment, clearly meant for sensitive cargo. They handled the crate with careful, professional respect, securing it in place. When Shadar finally lowered himself onto the canvas seat beneath the skiff's awning, his legs trembled with relief. The engines hummed to life, whisper quiet, and the skiff slid forward over the sand, skimming toward the distant glow. The light flats flowed beneath them like a silver sea under the rising sun. Shadar leaned back against the warm support, eyes half closed, and listened to his rescuers argue amiably about which route would dodge the restless patrols of the everlasting borderlands and the worst of the burning flatlands' midday heat. He thought about the wrecked skimmer fading into the dunes behind him, about the storm, about the dew little by little forming under starlight, about a planet that tried to kill you with heat by day and cold by night, and yet, somehow, still let life slip through the cracks. Above, Kais burned red and volcanic, and Udig watched, pale and steady. Twin moons, chaos and order, riding the sky of a world that had never been meant for humans and now belonged to them anyway. Shadar smiled just a little behind his breather. "I'm still here," he whispered to the desert, to the shipborne ghosts of his ancestors, to whoever might be listening. The skiff surged forward, carrying him and the Majesty's glittering crystals toward the rising towers of Netas, where the city lights of Rudbidh stabbed defiantly into the relentless sky.